Hello, Kenny. How are you?
So, how are you? Great to see you.
Episode 3.
We made it. When you first brought this up, I'm like, it's going to be one time cutting room floor. No one will ever hear from this stuff, but we made it to 3.
In Judaism, it's a chazaka.
That's right. I guess we're stuck now with each other.
This is fantastic.
How was your Purim?
Purim was spectacular, especially, and if I rate my Purim based on the wine, I would say super spectacular.
Same. Yeah, we drank some really, really top-notch wines. We could talk about that. I think we should. But yeah, I never know what people are going to hear this, but we're recording 2 days after Purim. It is Tuesday, March 26th. Before we go anywhere, speaking of, I woke up this morning to terrible news out of Israel, and I think often almost like glossed over what's happening in the north.
Yes.
And I want to read, I have a post here from Adam Montefiore, the well-known wine writer in Israel. It says, Avivim Winery from the Upper Galilee goes up in flames this morning, target of a direct hit by Hezbollah. By a miracle, no one was hurt, but I imagine the product of a lot of hard work and graft from the vineyard to the winery was destroyed. They have been hit 4 times in the past months, but this time with disastrous results. In the meantime, wineries in the Upper Galilee are closed, vineyards untended, families living as refugees in their own country, as Hezbollah bombs northern Israel on a daily basis. Symbolic, this Iranian subsidiary, who are anti-alcohol, preach against wine, a bedrock of Western civilization. They have hijacked Lebanon and played the major role in making that country dysfunctional and ungovernable. They are determined to provoke war with Israel purely to justify their existence. Both Hamas and Hezbollah don't drink wine. Blessed are the winemakers. That's how
I mean, blessed are the winemakers, and we think of them, and there's no words.
It's terrible. I did hear, since in reading this morning and looking further into it, that the winery is absolutely destroyed. Their wine is destroyed. But, Baruch Hashem, no one was hurt, which is, of course, the most important thing. But it's easy to forget that, what's happening in the north. And you're dealing with enemies that only want one thing, to end your way of life and to end us, period. But anytime any of these things, when they, I guess, each of us have different connections to Eretz Yisrael. And of course, you and I have a connection to wine and to Eretz Yisrael wine. And when you see this, and, we certainly talk about all the time, let's drink Israeli wine and let's make a thing of it. But, I'm living in the United States, you're living in Canada. We don't face this on a daily basis. These are people that have basically lost all of their business. I mean, these people, and I've even clearly lost their business, but these wineries up in the north are shut down. I mean, people are living in different areas because they can't live there. They're facing it. And it's interesting to see that winery has been hit 4 times already and destroyed today, unfortunately. But it's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine. We certainly continue to pray for an end to this and a successful outcome for our people, and that the hostages should be returned. It's day after day goes by, and it's easy to forget, and it's easy to move on with your life, but it's important always to remember. I think personally, the Purim story is more, I'm sitting in shul. I'm one of those guys that, and I hate to say it, I do it also on Yom Kippur a little bit. I'm like, how many pages are left to this? So I'm like looking, and but you're really like, this year is such a, how could it be any more concrete? The story as to we're living it, and they're certainly living it, especially considering, that we know Iran is behind a lot of this, and Persia. This is it really struck me more than ever this year, I think, the story of Purim.
It just changed a few names, the same story.
And as we say on Pesach every year, we're starting to think about that. It's that, in each generation, right? It's each generation, they rise up against us, which always strikes me, because exactly like you say, just change the names. Just change the names. It applies in every generation until Moshiach comes, which should be today.
Amen.
But anyway, I thought that certainly we should mention that, and that definitely always thinking about that and whatever we can do to help certainly the people of Israel, our brothers and sisters, and the wineries of Israel. We try to do that. We continue to try to do that.
So many of you are going to be buying wine in the next coming days and weeks for Pesach. Buy Israeli wine. I think it's the least that we can do. If you can find some of the wines from the Avivim Winery, that would be something special. I'm sure they're around. I've seen them over the years in North America. There probably are some around. Buy them. I mean, buy Israeli wine. The least that we can do is sit at our Seder table and be able to say that we did a little bit of something. 4 cups, we can make a bracha to elevate the wine from the Aretz, from the land, from our land, and support them and think of them. And not only say next year in Jerusalem, but also to try to be able to support them any way we can.
Agreed. I think we mentioned maybe on the last time that I know a lot of people, and I certainly intend to do that this year. My Seder wines will be exclusively Israeli. So
I would say that besides for one, all of our wines on Purim were Israeli as well, and we purposely did that.
So I guess that'll be our segue to a lighter topic. But what wines did you drink on Purim?
Oh, we had so many wines. But I have this bottle left over, and it's a classic. It's become a classic, I would say, from the Israeli winemakers. I have the Petit Castel 2020. So we have these wonderful friends, Susie and Peter, who live in Maine, and they joined us for Purim this year. And shout out to them.
I imagine your house is a thoroughfare for many people from many places.
It is. My house is a thoroughfare, but they're really special friends. They're celebrating their 5th anniversary soon, and they're some of my favorite wine aficionados. And they brought over the Petit Castel 2020, which is not around anymore. Now the 21 vintage is what's really selling,
right?
And it's drinking. I mean, fantastic. Do you know Eli Ben-Zakkain?
I don't think maybe I met him one time in person. I've certainly talked to him online multiple times, and I've written about Castel multiple times. I mean, how could you not? If I claim I write about wine, and I certainly, Castel is one of the. I think Castel should be given a lot of credit for bringing Israeli wine to the next level of like. Okay, we have a lot of great Israeli wine, but they really aim for the top. We're going to make world-class wine, and their whole operation there is indicative of that. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, year after year, their wines are definitely from the top. So where is Castel? We know Castel is it's in the Judean hills, somewhere between Yerushalayim and Tel Aviv.
Yes. I mean, don't ask me specific geography, but it's one of these places that people ask me all the time when they're visiting Israel, which wineries they can visit, especially if they don't want to stray far from Jerusalem. That's right nearby. I mean, you could easily get there from Yerushalayim, and it's a world-class operation there. Of course, connected to Castel nowadays is Raziel, which was kind of the offshoot. Also making really interesting wines. But, to back up that Castel, the flagship wine, the Petit Castel, we should say, and it's done in the same way they would do in France. And a lot of it is a lot of French connections to what they call their wines and how they make their wines. But the Petit Castel is, of course, the second wine, as they would call it. It's the flagship wine is the Grand Vin.
The Grand Vin. Can I humbly say that I think the Petit Castel is better?
You can say whatever you want, And it's funny. I was having this conversation with some people lately. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think that 20, maybe you're right. It's always, I think, hard to really gauge what a wine, especially a wine like the Grand Vin, it's meant really for a number of years. It's hard to right away. I mean, I have a hard time with even that with myself, but I think you're right. I think that it's maybe what it indicates anyway is that the Petit Castel is just really great quality for a second wine. Also,
it's a really great. I mean, this is their mid-range wine. It's just, it's just blackberry right in my nose. Like if you like fruit, that Petit Castel is really, really strong fruit.
They make really nice wines. I told this story recently, and somewhere I wrote it, but back in the day, I don't know, I guess it was probably released it was the 2014 Petit Castel. I guess it was released in 16 or 17. And a friend of mine found some kind of price mistake on wine.com, not kosherwine.com, wine.com. And they sell some kosher wines, interestingly. And he sent that to me, and he checked in with them, and like, that's the accurate price. We split a case. I really wish it would have been more. We split a case. I think I paid like $18 a bottle or something like that. Wow, what a steal that was in the grand. But I recently had the last one of my 6, because over the course of the last 8 years, I check and I'm like, this has all the time in the world left. When I first had it, and I had one left, and there was enough special people here to warrant it, including the guy that initially found that mistake. I had it with him. He probably would have killed me if I didn't. And it was fantastic. And my only regret was that it's still developing. I mean, it has plenty of time left. So that's a really, I think, a unique thing and a tribute to Eli Ben Zakkain, that a 10-year-old second wine was that alive and that well made. At 10 years later, it's fantastic. I mean, I don't think everyone paid $18 like me, but I would have happily paid full retail on that, and still would. So yeah, that's a great choice, and you can't really ever go wrong with that Petit Castel, can you?
You can never go wrong with it. And it's interesting that you're saying about the French influence, because you can definitely smell the French oak. It's a Bordeaux-style blend, with the Cab, with Merlot, and I know we spoke about this before, but Yisroel's done a lot of really great stuff with the Petit Verdot as that emulsifying / clarifying grape.
Do you know the blend on it? Does it say on the bottle?
It's right here. It says 40% Merlot. Sorry, 45% Merlot, 35% Cab, 20% Petit Verdot.
It's a Bordeaux blend, indeed.
It's a very classic Bordeaux blend.
Yes.
Something else that he does that not all Israeli winemakers do, which is his wines are all unfiltered.
Right. So you want to explain what that means?
So you can filter your wine before bottling, or you can keep it unfiltered, which means there's sediment in the wine. Now, some people who don't know much about wine will say, "Oh, there's like stuff in my wine." Well, actually, could be a prized possession, because most probably it means that wine is still going to age in the bottle. It's like almost like making a mini cask for your wine by keeping it unfiltered.
Right. It's an interesting thing, when you bring a filter, and I think when we've spoken about the topics we could talk about, we've spoken about that we should kind of cover that ground. We're not going to do that today about filtered wine, what that even means. We could just dabble in it. But something interesting about that's one place traditionally where wine could become non-kosher.
Yes.
Because, in very traditionally, they could use something like a sheepskin to filter the wine, or a bladder or something like that. I mean, remember, not skin, probably the bladder or something like that. But that's somewhere. But we'll cover that. That kosher topic is a big topic. I'm certainly lean on you, Rabbi. And
mavushal, non-mavushal, these are non-mavushal wines. We have to talk about all that stuff.
Right. Fining also could be non-kosher, and mavushal is a big topic. It's a big topic. But so that is, and you notice that that's unfiltered in its body, I would say also.
For sure. I mean, the
color body and heavy, and the real weight to it. Right.
Yeah.
Real weight.
You have I mean, and again, I mean, I can't help but this real Bordeaux style where you have the large fruit and you have that warming spice at the same time. Like, I love that. Most people will say when they're talking about a full-bodied wine and for Israeli wine, that's what people are looking for. They're looking for the large fruit and the warming spice.
I think a lot of people, when exactly what you're saying, then they ask for that, they're probably thinking of Castel.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly the wine that's probably in their imagination, because that covers that covers that base a lot of times. The Castel, the Grand Van has gotten pretty expensive, honestly. Like it's not a bottle I can afford all that too often, but if I'm buying it, it's going to be from a good vintage and I'll put it away, but it's expensive. So the Petit Castel has fallen more into my, all right, that's a bottle. And in fact, because it offers such like, it's really so well made, feel great buying that. And that's, so that is, I think probably far more often would, purchase the Petit Castel for those reasons. Listen, I can't afford everything. I'm a simple man. Man.
It's an expensive hobby, wine drinking.
Such an expensive hobby. I hope my wife is not listening. Yeah, I'll tell a funny story that she'll probably kill me for telling, but it was many years ago already, and I had, sizable amount of wine in a cellar. She's like, I won't say the number, but the number she thought, she's like, you probably have, she said, $200 of wine down here. I'm like, yeah, it's like $200 of wine. If she only knew it, that by now she certainly knows. And I get the good thing is that I primarily work out of my house, so I can intercept all the UPS deliveries before she sees them. But yeah, it is a very, very expensive hobby. But hey, I'm not ready to give it up just yet. And it's something I always tell people also is that it's so much more like a real talent, I would say, in wine is being able to discern the really good inexpensive wines. Anyone could say expensive wines are good. What do they need me and you for? Why do people ask? They're like, they want to spend $13. I don't know what that equates to Canadian dollars. I don't know if that's near it. I have no idea. I think it is, right?
But $18.
People want to spend, people want economy bottles that are really good. That's where you earn your keep, right?
And there are fluke bottles. There are sometimes these economy bottles that are just fantastic.
There's actually a fair amount. Where it gets really, really hard is the under $15 bottles of Mavushal wine. that's much more complicated. And that I get asked all the time because people make weddings and bar mitzvahs and those kind of things. And in the outside Israel, I should say, and outside Europe. So again, I don't know if that's true in Canada. Restaurants and events here, fairs, they're all Mavushal. It is a non-starter.
Yes.
That's its own topic.
And then you have to. Sometimes you have to have Mavushal with the right hechsher, right? Because very often you'll find Mavushal, and we'll talk about this in detail, but by 89 degrees, right? Is that really Mavushal? Is flash pasteurization really Mavushal?
That is true also, and that's why you'll see even like on an Israeli bottle, you may see 5, 6, 7 hechsherim on a bottle. Because it depends who it's for.
Right.
Because there are different, little intricacies of what makes wine specifically kosher. Or, that's complicated. And yeah, we should absolutely. I look forward to speaking about that. I had a really special bottle of wine because I have a very good friend. We ate Suda at his house, and we had the 2009 Chateau Smith Haut Lafitte.
No way.
It is a treasured bottle.
That is the creme de la creme.
It basically is. The Smith Haut Lafitte. It's Smith Haut Lafitte. I'm saying an American. And I'm sure people will say like I butchered it anyway. Hey, I'm an American. That's it. Doing my best here. But I got to his house and I said, things are going to get rolling. And we're going to start opening bottles. I'm like, I don't want to open anything you don't want to open. He said, you can choose anything you want out there. And we had that down there. And he was like, we loved it. It was fantastic. But it's something interesting. I'll tell you about it because, yeah, that's great wine. And everyone knows that. I'm not telling anyone anything they don't know. What was interesting about it, I found, is that a bottle like that, which is now 15 years old, I thought it was going to be super young. It wasn't. It was, I would say, well into its window of drinking. I would encourage anyone, certainly people that have more than one, or maybe the other way around, don't let that die in your cellar because that would be a real shame. I'm not saying you don't need to go and drink it now, but I found it interesting. I was, looking a little more into it. I knew 2009 is considered a great vintage in Bordeaux. What does that mean? That means like kind of across the board. Probably even producers that aren't normally making great wines were making great wines because it was just a kind of a perfect growing season. But what that also means is that a wine like this, where there's some line about how great winemakers make wine even in bad vintages, that kind of thing. So you would expect a bottle like this to be great and even potentially one of the best ever. And I think it's considered that 2009. But because it was such a top growing season, the fruit is so big and so ripe that you don't have the same, you're probably not going to have the same length to its life because it was even more approachable right out of the gate and so ready to drink. Some wines, because of, how the conditions that they faced, may need a few years to come around or begin being, that kind of idea. Because it was such a lush growing season, it was almost ready out of the gate. And I think 15 years now, you're seeing, you probably should start drinking these bottles. These are bottles that normally you would say maybe not even to touch until maybe now or 20 years. But I would say this bottle, I would tell people to drink it probably by latest 2030. And that's kind of uncommon from a bottle from a producer like Smith Haut Lafitte.
So from my understanding, Smith Haut Lafitte does a kosher run once every 5 years.
More or less, yeah. More or less 5 years. Right. And they just did one at 2019.
Yes.
Which is, they had, I think, a 15. I'd have to look. There was definitely a 14, 15. Maybe it was 14 and 15. It was 09. Yeah, about every 5 years. These places, they don't need to do it. They certainly sell it all, and they really obscene prices, which is why you need very generous friends to open these bottles for me.
Obscene prices. My understanding is that somebody goes in there and actually underwrites it, and that's how they do it. They pre-sell it. That's the only way they'll do it.
I didn't know that, and that very well may be. Well, yeah, I mean, this is a bottle that comes from the producer IDS, and that's Benjamin Uzan. IVS, he's an interesting guy. We could talk about him at a different time. He is
amazing. I mean, most of the kosher Burgundies are coming from him.
Right.
I would say most of the kosher higher end French wines are coming from him.
Yeah, a lot of them certainly. And he's had some level of hatzlacha also in that he's produced these wines, especially like one like Smith Haut Lafitte. He's chosen because it's not done every year. So he may decide to do it. You don't know, because you're right. He contracts it probably beforehand, and there's a lot. It's, as we know, a team has to come in and do it, which is why, as a separate conversation, also the kosher runs of these wines are not the same as the non-kosher runs. Not exactly the same. And part of the reason that is, meaning I don't have the bottle in front of me or any of the information. But it's Merlot Cab. It's left bank, so it's tab based, but there's probably some Merlot in there, but maybe nothing else. And the reason that is, one of the reasons why, is that once they send that team in, it's kind of like they're dealing with the fruit that's available then. Meaning they may not be able to flame it to the Petit Bordeaux, so they're not going to include it in the blend, things like that. So it may not all be timed the same way. So it's usually probably a more simple blend, but it's not the precise wine that the non-kosher cousin is, which I think a lot of people don't know. But made the exact same way, and the winemaker is certainly making every decision. And as you and I know, the only difference otherwise is that they bring in a team of mashgichim from the time that the grapes pressed, that they're the only ones that could touch it until it's in the bottle. So, but otherwise the wine is precisely the same, and they use precisely the same methods, but the blend is almost always different than the non-kosher one.
I can imagine, though, the winemakers get a little annoyed with it because they can't touch their own wine.
It's always an interesting thing, right?
Yeah.
And, we go to these wine shows where they'll have non-kosher wine, and if the winemaker's there or someone from the company, they can't even stand behind the table. Standing, and they know they can't get near the wine, and it's always such an interesting thing.
Yeah. I love to go through some of the kashrut and why that is.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people say, what's the big difference? Well, what's the big deal? Why does wine have to be even kosher? And we're going to get into that.
It's a big topic. It's a great topic, and there's a lot of misunderstandings about it, certainly.
Yeah, but
anyway,
how do you come down from a Smith Haut Lafitte?
Well, there were a lot of other good wines at that Suda also.
Well,
But
I'm curious, what else did you have?
So I'm actually trying to remember. It was a Purim Suda after all. We had some really great wines. We had Padis Brilliance. We had, which is a great bottle on its own right. That's California Cab. We had, we opened, interesting, that new Shiraz Nebbiolo.
Oh, we also opened it. It was great.
Very good wine. I really like it. The Weiss brothers have, I always refer to them as the rock stars of the wine and they're awesome guys. We both love them. Their red wines in the last couple of years have really come back to something that I personally love. I love their red wines. Because for a while, it was I think it was maybe my taste was changing. I'm there's a little too much for me. The last, not even, I don't know if it was just the last few releases, but I am loving their red wines again. I love them, and they're unique too, but we had that. That was great. But you're right. It's hard to drink a really special one and drink anything else. But we did.
That Nebbiolo definitely held up. They did a great job with that bottle, and it's young still.
Well, this one I had was brand new. This was when it was just released. So
it's young. So
yeah.
You don't even get what aging will do to that bottle.
Yeah, I love that they do these kind of lesser known grapes. Nebbiolo is in California. There's not even that much of it grown. Some people may not know that Shiraz is not what's called an estate winery. They don't have vineyards of their own. They buy grapes. They buy the best fruit they can buy, and they buy interesting stuff, and they make the wine. So there, you go to their winery, you're in a factory more than you're not sitting overlooking vineyards. But that's true even with Herzog. When you go to Herzog in Oxnard, that's not, it's in a commercial area. Beautiful place, and it's really lovely inside, but you're not overlooking vineyards, right?
I would say it's true of most of the kosher wineries outside of Israel.
I think it's accurate for the most part, yeah. Certainly California, with the exception of Hagafen.
That's a beautiful vineyard there.
Hagafen. You talk to Ernie, and you'll never, when you talk to him, unless you were specifically interviewing him on the cause, he doesn't talk about kosher or not kosher. He talks about making great wine. And you go there, there's no real indication that the place is necessarily kosher.
The majority of the people who are there are just on one of their Napa wine tours.
Right. The old move of restaurant's kosher. There's a guy wearing a yarmulke in there type of thing. You walk into the tasting room, you're probably not going to see a yarmulke there. For the most part, right. They're they're in a beautiful spot in Napa, Silverado Trails, they call it. And they get, all kinds of buses stopping there. And which is so cool because these people are they love the wine. And it happens to be kosher.
One of my favorite things about it is people don't even realize he has 3 wines: the Boré, the Pri, and the Hagafen.
Right. I love that too. Yes. The Pri, of course, is only a club wine, so you don't necessarily see that on your shelves. But and what is the Boré?
The Boré, I think, is his lower end wine. Actually, it's a lot of his sweeter wines.
Oh, he calls it it's Boré, but that's where it comes from.
Yeah, Boré, yeah.
You like the hat beret. That's what it is, right? I couldn't remember what that was. Yeah, it's great. He's really the pioneer out there. They've been there since 1979 kosher, which is a long time already. I know because I'm that old, but it's really amazing. And but that is a place where you sit and overlook wine, the vineyards, and it's pretty cool.
If you go to Fort Case, if you have that joy of spending some time with Binyamin, you also have that
microscopic. Binyamin Pence is by himself out there on the mountainside in Santa Cruz. But correct, I've never had that opportunity to see. Have you?
The Kavanah. There's nothing like the Kavanah.
Amen. That's awesome. Someday that's a bucket list thing for me.
You and I should go together.
I would love to.
Binyamin would love it.
I think so. I hope so.
I think so.
I don't know if I would just show up at his door, but maybe that's the way to do it.
Speaking of these California wineries, actually, I think last episode we made a little faux pas. I made a faux pas. I said 15, but actually there's 5 dedicated kosher wineries, and I was referring to there are many others that do kosher wines.
Yes, including some really high-end ones.
Marciano.
Mayakamas.
Yeah.
Yeah, One Hope, right? Isn't that?
One
Yes.
Hope. Yes, One Hope.
But so then the 5 are, we mentioned them all: Herzog, Hagafen, Four Gates, Shira, and Covenant. Of course, we did not mention the great Covenant winery
Jeff and Jody.
of Berkeley, right? Yes, yeah.
And the Rebbe of kosher wine, Jonathan Haydu.
That's right. That's an example of a wine made in California, but that's not its own winery. Jonathan, the 40 under 40. I don't think he's under 40 anymore, but a great man, a great winemaker. He's the winemaker for Covenant, who makes his own wines, which are really cool too. There's a lot of special stuff. Like, it's just like, it's so. This is a topic, wine, that you're like, well, aren't you going to run out of topics? No, not really. And you know why? Because every single, there's always new wines coming out, but forget that for a second. Every vintage is different. Yeah. So, one year's wine may be very different from the next year's. In addition to the fact that wine ages and changes and lives and breathes. So it's always, there's always new things to review and discuss.
Jonathan is someone I want to have on this podcast. He's a bold winemaker.
I mean, having a podcast where I'm not standing next to him because he's like a foot taller than me. I think you are also, though. So
he's an amazing.
Yeah, he's awesome. I mean, they're that the team at Covenant is great, and John's been there for a long time already, and he is amazing, and his wines are so cool. And look at those labels. How cool are those labels?
But there's no rhyme or reason to his labels. It's just like whatever he sticks on there.
Is there no rhyme or reason?
No.
Is that true?
Yeah, they're just funky labels, and sometimes
his wife is the artist. You know that, right? Ellie Haydu she draws all those cool. I think they're so cool, but there's no reason why they never have been. I never really thought about that. I guess
I actually received the same bottle that had 2 different labels in the front.
Is that right?
There's really no. He just sent me his new vermouth, and it's
right.
We opened it on Purim. It was something. It's really. We had a lot of fun. I did some mixing with it.
I have to get that. I did get, and I got from Alex Haruni of Dalton. I always feel like kind of like a jerk saying it Dalton, but that's what they call it. It's not Dalton.
That is what it is. It's Dalton. People call it Dalton, but it's really Dalton.
It's Dalton. So Alex Haruni, who I saw with Guy Eshel, who also hot people. Yeah, Guy's amazing.
One of the best winemakers. Wow.
Dalton is so underrated for so long. But anyway, but Alex, I mentioned him. I'm like, wow, I really wanted to get a bottle of that vermouth. He came over to me at the end of the show, and he's like, take this home with you. And I'm like, I love him forever because of that.
Guy walked over to me at the end of the show, and he handed me the new Fumé Blanc vintage, the 2023, which isn't out yet.
That's awesome.
And he said, I brought it with me on the plane. You didn't try it, right? I said, no, I didn't try it. He's like, here, you must have this.
You're going to have to try that on the show because I want to hear all about it.
That is something special. Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing your notes since I don't have the bottle, but I'll make sure to look and get it because, his Fumé Blanc is always delightful. And I don't think that's out yet. I guess it's not.
No, it's not.
That, but I mean, even since
then, he brought it with him on the plane.
Right. I haven't seen it yet, so yeah. Oh well, that's something to look forward to.
Wow. I feel like what else do we talk about now?
That was good stuff there. What do you need to conquer the world in one podcast? Yeah. We have great topics, and like I told Yisroel earlier, I'm like, anytime I clearly didn't. Neither of us do any real planning for this. It's as natural and free flowing as it gets, I think, which is what's cool about it. But for something like the big topics, I'm gonna have to do a little review because I can't look like that much of an idiot on this thing. I have to have some level of if I say it, it's true. But so
we want to hear from you. You're listening to us. We're a community here. We want to hear from you. We have an email, kosherwinepodcast@gmail.com. It's that simple. And you can send us your comments, your questions, things that you want us to cover. We want to do that. I mean, we're we love wine. We will talk anything we can talk about wine, but we want to talk about something that's going to matter to you and that will make a difference in your life.
Absolutely. Well, this is great. I have gotten a lot of good feedback, by the way. I don't know if you have also, but
I've gotten some great feedback.
Really, really interesting feedback. So, yeah, we'll definitely look forward to hearing from anyone and everyone, questions and comments. So, but it's great to be here once again with you. It's always great to see you. I put it on my calendar, and I'm like, it's something I look forward to in the course of my day. I wish everything were as wonderful on my calendar.
I feel the same way. This has really been just a light to my day, to my week, and let's do it again.
Yep. Great seeing you.
In a few days?
Absolutely. I'm in. You're not, well, now that it's a chazaka, there's only to move forward from here.
That's it. Up and up. L'chaim, l'chaim.
L'chaim.